approach is not energy only, quote, okay, air quote on that, and it's not capacity only, it's a combination. We have both. We have an energy scarcity pricing mechanism, which reflects reserves when they start to go short. And as you go short reserves, the opportunity cost of going short reserves has to enter the energy price. You get some pretty high prices, $2,700. And then we have a capacity construct, which is paying excess capacity to be around. We now have a penalty factor if you don't show up. So we also have these extra payments that go in and making sure the resources are running when they need to run. All right, so one of the things that's currently going on in this marketplace, we have a lot of policy creative distortions in the marketplace, and they may be for good reasons, but if you're looking at how your markets operate from day to day based on energy dispatch and commitment and making things work, they create some problems for you. For example, if wind is paid money, so much so that they get paid even if the energy price goes negative, you have trouble signaling your market what you need. You may not have an incentive to produce electricity at the right time. It's going to be blowing when it blows, and we're going to run the wind power straight out. So what happens in PJM? MISO has a lot of wind power. They don't have a lot of load at 2 o'clock in the morning. We get to see the wind. We get to greet the wind power coming in. In the PJM, that affects our commitment to dispatch because we can't see that. We have wind power in our own system, and they have up to $40 in REC credits. They're willing to run until it goes down to -40 before they even think about backing down. And meanwhile, we have a hot day coming up, and so we have to have all the nukes on running, and they're not very flexible, so you wind up with negative prices. Very negative prices sometimes. So how do you comport that with thermal units that have a positive cost with these guys who are getting a subsidy? Right or wrong, it's still affecting your market, and you have to design around that. The one thing I'm going to real quick. All right. Okay, demand response. One of the things that we have is we had a commission that was really interested in, say it again, in demand response. We create incentives in the marketplace. One of the things that you run into with designing these markets is incentives matter. If you create incentives for something to show up, you're going to get them. One of the things that we did in our initial capacity construct is that we created an incentive for DR to exist that was superior to that to building generation. Because DR did not have the same obligations to run, did not have any of those commitment problems, had no market power mitigation, so you had offers $1,800, $2,700 on them before they would even think about coming out of the system. And you had inadvertently created an incentive for generation to not locate in front of the meter where you could see them, but to go behind the meter where you couldn't, where they didn't have the rules applied to them for an energy capacity resource. So what you had was an inferior good competing with a normal good in the marketplace with effectively a single price for that. What happens in that context? Well, if you can provide a less favorable good, it's cheaper to provide, less obligations, and you get the same money as the guy putting up a lot of risk because he's going to have to run his performance obligations. You can tell where the market's going to go on that one, and it did, and it has been. We had so much demand response coming to the marketplace that our reserve margin was DR. But DR only had an obligation to run in the summer. Polar vortex or cold snap, they don't have to show up. Meanwhile, you need all the capacity you have on the system. A lot of people are on outage, and the DR didn't have to respond. All right, creates a problem. So you have to make sure your incentives are lined up, your obligations are lined up to make it work. And this is just a quick graphic showing coal disappearing, natural gas coming on. You see the crossing lines. And that's just one of the last challenges I'll talk about, and I'll leave the rest for questions. Thank you very much.
Cooperative in near Austin, Texas, right? We're out of town. Johnson City, which is President Lyndon B. Johnson's boyhood home. But oddly enough, the city was not named after him or his family. So, but that's not what we told people growing up. It's funny because it took me quite a while to pronounce Montague River, so I'll forgive you for Pedernales. It is a tricky one. I'll give sort of a practical presentation on what's going on down in ERCOT, the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. The wholesale power market side's been deregulated for around 20 years, and the retail side is approaching about 14 years. So I titled the presentation a Success Story in Progress, because it's a continual work in progress. As my prior presenters have said, every day in ERCOT, folks are meeting, hundreds of folks are meeting, stakeholders are meeting constantly to make changes to the market, evaluate what's coming, and make tweaks. So everything's it's very dynamic and very much in line with the nature of this conference. I've already kind of gone over this. A little bit different. ERCOT is electrically isolated from the other NERC regions and ISOs, so it doesn't necessarily come under FERC jurisdiction in some regards. So Texas has and ERCOT has a lot of autonomy in terms of how it develops its market rules and propagates those into being in the electric market in Texas. I think a lot of Texans like it that way. That way we can secede from the nation if we have to, which is what our old Governor Perry used to say. No, it's just a joke. There's over 24 million consumers in Texas. ERCOT doesn't encompass all of Texas, so there are small regions that still aren't in ERCOT, and they are still cost of service and fall under some of the other service territories. There's over 43,000 miles of transmission lines, 74,000 megawatts, serving about 340,000 million kilowatt hours per year. Just this last summer, we did hit a new peak of 69,000, almost 70,000 megawatt hours. So if you're thinking of these reserves and you're trying to keep your capacity ahead of your peak, you're thinking 74,000 megawatts firm capacity and 70,000 megawatt peak. It's pretty darn close, if you ask me. And we were watching it pretty closely all summer, looking for those high prices. I think the interesting thing on this chart, if you see the percentage of wind in Texas is now around 11% on an energy basis. And notice the other piece of pie. So we have 4 nuclear units in Texas generating 11% of the energy. So wind is now producing in ERCOT as much as the 4 nuclear units that we have. So it's pretty incredible. Natural gas is obviously on the rise, and coal is on the decline. Solar, hydro, those all constitute less than 1% of the ERCOT market. Back when they implemented what's called the locational marginal price, or Texas nodal market, in the 2010-11 time frame, it really took ERCOT from just more of a reliability-centric institution organization to really put the full efficiency of the economics in the hands of ERCOT. And so ERCOT's responsible for the cost-effective and efficient dispatch of all the generation in ERCOT on a day-to-day, real-time basis. And it's just a fascinating process that takes place if you ever want to take a look at it. Just to refresh real quick, the wholesale power market is unregulated, restructured. Transmission is still a cost of service or regulated institution in Texas. And then on the retail side, most of the load is served under a competitive process where there's retail competition, residential and commercial and industrial users, and hey, who supplies their wholesale power? They can aggregate their load and negotiate for better contracts, except for a few small areas in municipals and cooperatives, which are typically called public power entities. They are sort of non-opt-in entities. They still participate in a lot of the market processes, but they're not subject to open access for retail competition. Just this last June, the price cap was raised in ERCOT to $9,000 per megawatt hour. So to give you a sense of the scale, in 2014, the average price across ERCOT wholesale power was $42. So we're talking about over 200 times the typical price. And as a retail electric provider in Texas, and somebody who buys a lot of power on the wholesale power market, there's a tremendous incentive to avoid that $9,000. If my load is exposed to that $9,000, I don't have supply for that. I'm certainly incentivized to hedge that risk and prevent that from occurring. I thought it was surprising in the early days we saw high prices at ERCOT, but we saw a lot of bankruptcies. The retail electric providers were caught short. They did, they were like right in the market and all that stuff. And then they got caught short by high pricing. But if you notice this last summer, we still had a lot of high prices. We got record peaks. Virtually no bankruptcies on the wrap. So I think over the years they've really instituted a lot of good power trading, risk management practices, and they're managing the risk very well. ERCOT, as you know, there's no central authority for the development of generation. It's solely up to an investor to react to the necessary incentives to bring in generation. There's no central capacity market. It's energy only. So for the most part, when you're looking at adding a large-scale generation asset or small-scale generation asset, you're essentially justifying your investment either on a bilateral contract that you execute with a counterparty who's concerned about that $9,000 per megawatt hour, or you're going to try to make it as a merchant on the market and chase the price. But if you do choose to build a generation asset, it's at your own risk, and there's no recourse back to the public in general. So we don't have a capacity market. In ERCOT, there's a day-ahead or real-time market. The day-ahead is equal optimization of energy and all the other ancillary services. And in real-time right now, we're just energy only. But about every 5 minutes, ERCOT runs a system model that optimizes the market, determines the market price clearing of energy at all the nodes and load zones in the market. So how's our reserve margin looking? It's quite healthy. This can change fairly drastically from year to year, depending on what's going on. But and we've seen it drop fairly low, almost down to 13%. ERCOT targets a planning or an operating reserve of about 12.5%. You can see the blue numbers across the bottom: 17, 18, 21, 18, 17% reserve margin. So even without all of the central command and control activities or the central planning activities, ERCOT continues to sustain and maintain what some people believe is a healthy reserve margin. However, this can change quickly, and if you're somebody who tracks this from year to year, ERCOT's using continually more sophisticated measures to include demand response and include wind and intermittent resources in the calculation. And so if you're somebody who does a lot of risk analysis, it doesn't take much before you can kind of stress this model. And again, but typically this is only for a few hours of the year, and for the most part, in every other hour of the year, there's ample reserve to meet the demand. So let's look at last summer. Even though we were hitting these record peaks on a continual basis and at pretty high temperatures, our average pricing across the summer was under $30 per megawatt hour. I think a lot of people would be envious of that pricing. Certainly it's due in large part to low natural gas pricing. You can also see at minimums, even throughout the summer, we had negative pricing, as was discussed earlier. And when I say negative pricing, this is across the entire market. So periods, not just locally in West Texas where we have a lot of wind, but the entire market settled on a negative basis, which means people were paying to run their units. Of course, in August and July, you can see we had pricing $508. In August, when we had our record peak, we reached about $1,000 per megawatt hour. So, and when you look at even that pricing occurred for maybe one interval, 1 hour at most. Otherwise, it was fairly flat around the state. I'm showing the heat map because it's kind of a good segue to my next chart. The heat map you see here with the color coding, if there were transmission congestion in our state, the map would look, like a rainbow. But here we are in the middle of the afternoon on September 9th, 2006, pretty high loads, and I've got a single uniform color across my state. So back to the statement that was made earlier about trying to co-optimize transmission and generation investment, because transmission has been still regulated in Texas, we have ample transmission. It's a great place to put your money in Texas to get a guaranteed return. And since 2010, ERCOT's seen an 89% increase in the cost of transmission, or the rate that folks are paying for transmission. That's about, for the average consumer, it's about $10 per megawatt hour, or about a cent per kilowatt hour for the consumer. So the increased cost of transmission is causing a lot of folks to chase that, figure out ways to reduce the way they use the transmission system. And in fact, that incentive alone is driving a lot of folks to reduce their peak consumption during the summer. And so now ERCOT's relying even on that to consider resource adequacy and things like that. One of the interesting mechanisms that was more of a control approach was the clean renewable energy zones in Texas. This is where Texas decided to pre-build transmission to locations in the state that were suitable for renewables such as wind and solar. That came into a cost of about $7 billion, so that drove a lot of this increase. But I think the consumers may feel that it was justified, and that now we have this low price, in part due to the wind, and they're recovering that cost with the low pricing. Another big story for ERCOT is the renewable story. We're probably, even as I put this 15,635 megawatts installed wind, it's probably already wrong. It could be 16,000 by now. But there's around 16,000 megawatts installed wind in ERCOT along the coast and in the west area. Wind energy in 2014 was about 11%. I have some statistics over here. We set some new records. Concurrent wind generation on September 13th was about 11,400 megawatts. And back in March, when our loads were down, wind was about 40.58% of the total energy in ERCOT. So wind is definitely a significant factor here to stay and contributing quite a bit. And solar's coming in quick. There's 198 megawatts of solar. There's over 6,000 megawatts of interconnections being studied. There's a lot of West Texas solar. It looks really good from a solar profile. And since it's so far west, it's very concurrent with the peak in central Texas. It's far enough away that it actually shifts the peak by the time the sun gets there. You're looking at 385 possibly coming in. 2016 is going to be a massive year for solar in ERCOT. I'm seeing it on the residential level, distributed level. Prices are incredibly low. I'm seeing pricing for distributed generation projects, say 5 to 10 megawatts in the low 50s. And so if you compare that to, say, on-peak price for power of $70 or $80 per megawatt hour, these PPAs start to look pretty good, and that's fixed for 25 years. So what are the residential folks seeing? Texas average, which also, when you look at the PIA data, includes the non-ERCOT areas, is 11.86 cents per kilowatt hour. However, that's the average. And if you're active in determining who provides your electric service, there are offers out there in the 5 to 5.9 cents per kilowatt hour range in most of the populated areas of Texas. So I think from a consumer perspective, the consumers, which we think particularly short term, are probably pretty happy with the rates. I think one of the challenges we're going to be facing in the future is that it doesn't take long before the habit forms, and they're all very used to low power bills right now. And if we have any perturbations or high natural gas prices or anything that happens, I think there could be some shock involved as people are exposed to higher pricing. And it's also driven a lot of folks to go very short in their thinking for the most part. And so if we have something like the Clean Power Plan come in and result in a significant reduction in installed firm capacity, you're going to get into a resource adequacy issue. ERCOT's recent report, in fact, it just came out based on their final ruling, said that they're looking at potentially 4,200 megawatts of coal retirements through 2030. A lot of us kind of are thinking they're probably going to likely retire anyway, just due to age and economics. So for some of us, it seems kind of not necessarily a big deal, but from a reliability and maybe a resiliency perspective, it could be problematic, particularly if the capacity is being made up for by wind and solar and other intermittent resources. So, and then obviously with shifting around big capacity in the market, you get into a lot of transmission issues. You just spent a lot of money on this transmission, and now the generation's moving around. So what happens to your investment there? So, bottom line, here in ERCOT, market optimization. There's a lot of focus on how do we continue to drive market mechanisms that provide for a competitive platform to provide incentive for whatever services they are. And these are constantly shifting. Now we're looking at fast response ancillary services, and that's going to, batteries are probably the best approach there, but folks are going to figure it out. That also, we're looking at renewable power integration, how do we continue to manage all this renewable energy coming in and make sure we maintain reliability. Real significant focus, and the new task force that just formed ERCOT, DREAM, Distributed Resources Energy and Ancillary Service Markets, is focused on, you got to be careful calling something DREAM, because it may not ever become reality. But distributed energy resources are huge in Texas. Right now, ERCOT stops at the transmission level, and they don't really look past sort of the high voltage level. But with this distributed energy resources coming in, you're seeing more of an encroachment on the ISO into the distributed platform. They want to know where these rooftop solar projects are. They want to know where these battery projects are. And so there's a little bit of conflict there because the distribution providers aren't used to having those folks involved. And they're not typically involved in a lot of the planning work that goes on the transmission side. So there'll be new reporting requirements, and ERCOT, maybe they want to dispatch resources at the distributed level. We don't know. So there's a lot of work going on in that area. A lot of us are still concerned with resource adequacy and scarcity pricing. We haven't seen the $9,000 per megawatt hour. It may get tested, and we don't know. It'll pass. It doesn't take much for the politicians to turn it around, but so far it seems to be okay. And then obviously now we're wrestling with the clean air impact and trying to understand what impacts that will have on us. What, if anything, we plan for that. So I appreciate it. It's a success story in progress, and if you're ever in Texas, look me up. I'll take you down to ERCOT. You can see all the politics that go on. But again, it's not the politics happening at the Service Commission or the legislature. It's happening amongst the stakeholders and the participants. And, it's a tremendously democratic process, and it can be frustrating at times, but it seems to be working. So, thank you for your time.
So I hope you've been jotting down your questions, and if you do, you can get yourself to a mic and identify yourself and start asking questions. Right here would be good.
I'm Raul Bajo. I'm a PhD student at Rice University. I would like to talk about ask you a question about the airport market. So you mentioned that how healthy is the reserve level, but that was not true I would say 3 years ago, in which you have projected negative reserves actually. And on top of that, you mentioned that, maybe that consumers are very happy in Texas because you have very low prices. But in the previous presentation, you mentioned that the price was like 5,000 megawatts per hour during the polar vertex, so I don't know how happy are they. So my question is, to what extent does this ORDC that you implemented solve the problem of adequacy? And by including this measure, are you revealing that you need some sort of capacity mechanism or some sort of capacity market to solve the adequacy problem? That's my question.
I'll try to start. I think the question was, it wasn't long ago that we were forecasting negative reserves in ERCOT, and we've said that rates are relatively low.
So the point is, everything is interconnected, right? So you had this negative projection for reserves, so you increase the cap. By increasing the cap, you have consumers maybe less happy, right? Because you see hitting the 5,000 price.
Right. So
then you implemented the ORDC. So you see it's like experiment going on in ERCOT, so I don't know how...
I think it's a continual experiment.
Yeah, but so this I don't know how successful is the story.
I guess over the years, folks have become smart. And for the folks that are exposed to the market price, the large industrials or commercial, they're prepared to shed load if they see that high pricing. And they may even benefit by shedding load during that high pricing through some service that ERCOT offers. So a lot of that's been mitigated. And then most of the load is not exposed to that high pricing because they're either under contract or they're working through a retail electric provider who's not likely to pass along that high price. So ERCOT, I don't see ERCOT implementing a capacity market anytime soon. They've taken a look at it, and there just hasn't been the support to implement it, and they've essentially reaffirmed to go with energy only. And so we'll continue to experiment with this high price cap.
And the ORDC,
Oh, I'm definitely not an expert in that, but
What did you want to know about the ORDC?
My question is, are you recognizing you need some sort of capacity market that you call ORDC in the ERCOT case?
That's a real-time mechanism, and the capacity market, at least in New England, PJM is a forward market. Okay, so all the ORDC does is all it does, but it affects the real-time price, the spot price, which is going to affect forward contracts that are bilateral contracts in ERCOT. There's a similar demand curve in New England and PJM, but we also have a forward, a system-wide forward market, which is called the capacity market. So less emphasis is placed on that demand curve. It doesn't have to be as high, but it's there to provide the right incentive. In both cases, like I said, both cases ended up being $9,000. You know, I mean, pick a number out of that. They could have been, 8,000, 12,000, but Dale ended up on 9,000. It doesn't need to be big. Why 9,000 is the right number? I don't know.
Right. So just to follow up on that, I think the ORD, these curves are designed to explicitly value reserves in energy, right, real time. So you're paying for stuff in excess of what's running. And that's sort of the secret. And that the idea is if you get it right, maybe you don't need a capacity construct. They can be designed very locationally. They can tell you exactly where you've got a problem, and those are nice and neat. The thing you get in the capacity markets, you start getting complicated, making sure that where you place the stuff, where your price signal is actually going to be lined up with where you're going to run short in energy. That's why one of the reasons we've got both. And you want to make sure the signals that you have from those two things are working together, so you don't get the wrong answers, which is part of the complexity of making it work. The other reason we have two is that one of the things that happened in California, and one of the reasons that we don't have a whole lot of these, still have some holdouts, not interested in going to the competitive construct way, is you got a really high price. People love markets when the prices are low. You got ERCOT, hey, the prices are low, we're happy, right? As soon as that thing pops up to $9,000, you're going to hear some people, their phone's going to start ringing off the wall somewhere, and people are going to be very, very upset. So one of the things that we had, and people get upset in our capacity construct too, because they think the prices are too high. But it's easier to sell that in some ways because it's less of a shock. You kind of get used to it after a while. It's riding around a certain level. But as soon as you get to $2,700, that's a PJM. Phone rings off the wall. It's like, how did that happen? Why do we have a shortage situation? And people react to those. And so it's sort of trying to find a balance. How do you balance that? Make sure that you have enough money going into the system to value the reserves you're maintaining without scaring everyone to death and having them say we don't want to do markets anymore.
My name is Jared Moore. I'm an independent consultant based out of Washington, D.C. My fundamental problem with markets, and electricity markets specifically, is that the prices have irreducible uncertainty. We don't know how the economy is going to grow, and we don't know what the weather's going to do. We also don't know what the price of natural gas is going to be more than 5 years in the future. And markets also, there's an inability to internalize some of the externalities. Of course, everybody's concerned about carbon emissions. The social cost of carbon has irreducible uncertainty because it's dependent on the discount rate and the level of risk aversion. And on the other side, Severin Borenstein just came out with a paper that I thought was very good when he said that basically there's R&D that has positive externalities that's not internalized by the person doing the R&D. And so, given these fundamental problems with markets, do you guys think that there is a market-based mechanism that could possibly incent massive change in our grid, and specifically meaning nuclear and CCUS? What market-based mechanism could encourage a developer to put down $10 billion given all the uncertainty and given the fact that all these externalities aren't internalized?
So I don't think that it's likely that those are good decisions. If it's a $10 billion nuclear plant can't be built in a market because it's too much risk, that's probably because there's too much risk and it shouldn't be built. Nobody wants to take on that risk. People are, the market is, the demand expressed by the market is saying, no, it's not, just not worth it. I mean, we'd rather have a lower risk, smaller increments in capacity and things like that. So I think the market is saying, yeah, it's making the right decision and not going back.
All right, so just if I could respond to that. Two things. First of all, anytime you don't have externalities internalized in the marketplace, you have an issue. That's not really the market's problem, per se. It's responding to the price signals you have provided. If you have externalities or a public good, work has to be done to try to internalize those. There is value to reliability. The market by itself will not recognize that, but if policymakers say, I don't want a blackout, then you have an order to do something about that. If people think that there's an externality associated with an emission, then it's up to the folks making those decisions. What is that externality? And then if you can express that in, say, an allowance price or a tax, it gets internalized. And then you can make decisions which are rational. And once you have that, markets are perfect. Markets are awesome. On the margin, they make the right decisions and they shift the risk around. If you say, hey, you know what, as a resource planner, I really like the idea of a nuke. Why are nukes being built? Well, they're not sustainable right now. They don't make any sense. Maybe it's because we haven't internalized the cost. But right now, on the margin, they're losing money. Gas is much cheaper than anyone expected. I don't know what the gas price is going to be in 5 years. But right now, people are making rational decisions based on their expectations. 5 years ago, no one saw the gas price going down. And things have changed because of the gas price. And what we've seen is a very rapid turnover of resources that you couldn't have seen under a regulated, integrated planning system. The coal units are going out, and it's not really about the regulation. It's not so much about the environmental stuff. They were starting to prepare for some of this stuff. They knew they were going to go out, but the gas prices cut their legs out. And it's doing the same thing to nukes, and nukes are carbon neutral. They're getting destroyed. Some of the units are going out because they're not economical at this point. And at some point, if it's an externality, internalization thing, that has to be adjusted. But once you've done that, markets are fantastic.
So if, we don't know what the carbon tax is going to be, let's say it's 35. And that basically means we're only going to have modest decarbonization over the next 40 years. I mean, that's probably what the models are saying right now. So are you okay with that? Do you have that much faith in markets that you think that's an okay answer, modest decarbonization over the long haul?
I'll go first. I would say if that is the assumed value, then yes, right? So it's up, the market's not going to know what that is. I don't think really anyone knows what it is. You're arguing that it's not high enough. Someone else is going to say it's too high. Someone else is going to say it should be $5,000. Whatever it's going to be, you have to agree on it and make a policy. Once it's policy, the market will help you get to your goal. And if you mess up the incentives, you're going to wind up in a bad spot. We've done that with DR. We've done that in various markets. It's not because DR isn't good. It's just we have market rules that are set up to pervert the incentives. You get the wrong thing. So the idea is set the incentives correctly and then let the market work.
Hi, thanks for the talks. They were great. Michael Craig, second year VP PhD student here at Carnegie Mellon. I know that MISO and CAISO have both been experimenting with flexibility ramping products. Over the next 10 to 15 years with clean power plant or renewables, what kind of market instruments or market products do you think RTOs are going to start procuring? Or if you don't think they are, what would you like to see them start to get?
Well, I haven't reviewed California's flexible ramp product. But let me say this: I had a discussion with somebody here at this meeting about capacity markets and types of capacity. The capacity markets that are in place today don't distinguish between different types of capacity: flexible, non-flexible. And that may be a hole in the market design. I can't say for sure that it is, but if you just have a single price for all types of capacity, why is that the right answer? It may not be the right answer. It may be that you have to start with some capacity as a forward market. You may need a forward market to recover the fixed costs primarily for some of these other attributes. And it should be relatively easy for an ISO, an RTO to add that into the auction for capacity. I don't know how exactly ERCOT would respond to that. Are they giving a ramping product as well? They make it looking a lot of things, but.
The three things that we're seeing in ERCOT are refined and better forecasting of the renewables. So they have a much better grasp on when the energy's coming and how much is going to be there. And then they're trying to combine that with things such as co-optimization of energy and ancillary services in real time. So, and then bring in multi-interval SCAD. So where they can look at more than just one interval ahead, they can look several hours ahead. So you combine that with better forecasting of the renewables, and they're just sort of applying the same techniques, just doing it better. But they are looking at new ancillary services as well, so it's the fast frequency response.
So some of the things that are just mentioned that ERCOT's looking at, PJM has implemented, they've got better forecasting, that certainly helps. They used to have something where they used to look ahead 5 minutes and dispatch and run the system that way. I kind of akin that to going about 100 miles an hour and then trying to steer your car just looking just ahead of the hood. Doesn't really work very well. But if you have a system that looks 15, 30, 45, hour and a half ahead, it can anticipate changes. Not always going to be right because you're doing it based on estimates, but you commit and dispatch resources accordingly, and it does a better job that smooths things out. Do we need more products? Maybe. We have a regulation market right now that's going to go through a major overhaul. The idea is to be a shock absorber relative to our forecasts. Questions are, is it doing the job correctly? Do we need other products? Perhaps. One of the things you have to do is recognize the things that you want in the marketplace to make it work, and then design markets to value it, and then you'll get it if you do it right. You may get the wrong thing if you don't do it right. We have that too. But going through and making sure, hey, we need more regulation, we need different types of regulation, you set up a market that rewards it. You need different kinds of capacity, you set up a market to reward it. But you have to identify those things. And I think right now we're kind of in a state of flux. California has a very different resource mix because they've required a certain amount of renewables to come in. And they don't necessarily have signals on the margin for resources that are doing that to back off when it's bad. So they're going to have to do something about that with the thermal units, which they still need to maintain reserves and regulation and everything else. They're going to have to reward those resources and stick around or they're going to go. Then they're going to have a problem. So it's identifying the values vectors that you want to have and make sure you got the market that gets those.
By the way, we're only gonna have time for one or two more questions, so if you guys wanna convince on what question you all wanna ask.
So Eric Williams, Rochester Institute of Technology. We have the REV process going on in New York, which is your last question. Should be lots of new products and market actors. And an open-ended question is, where do you all think this is going to go, and what products are, what might see emerge?
I'm a little bit familiar with it, and I would like somebody to do a study on how much it's going to cost New York ratepayers. All right, there's a lot of the distribution companies are all gung-ho about this, right? Why are they gung-ho about it? Well, they're going to have to add a lot of equipment, right? There's about, I calculated once, there's about, looked at some calculations that are out there, there's about 10 times the amount of distribution lines, length, somehow you measure that, as there are transmission lines. Now, if you decide that you're going to put sufficient protection on all of the distribution lines in New York, not just the city, to enable this new market, well, that's a large investment, probably, all right? And so that's going to cost a lot of money. Is it a benefit? Well, yeah, but does it outweigh the cost? I think that's a question. And so I think that's one unanswered question I'd like to see answered.
Real quick, you have to ask why. And I think Mara is kind of covering that. So if you're identifying, people are saying we want a more reliable system, then you have to ask how much money you want to pay for it. If that's why, is that the why? And if it is, then you have to make these decisions. We have a lot of reliability in theory built into the system. I know we haven't had rate cases in a long time. One of the questions to go through is what's the tree trimming service? I know a lot of the response to this stuff, right, is it going on? Are we getting what we're paying for now? One of the things that happens is the storm comes through, people tend to respond to emergencies. We've been saying that the capacity market was messed up, and it was messed up, and it was messed up for years in PJM. Didn't have the right incentives for people to operate. We had a reserve margin that was DR. Cold snap, reality slaps you in the face. And everyone said, hey, wait a minute, what were the people saying with their problems with this market? Let's go fix it. So there's always a reaction, but you always have to question you can overreact. And so one of the questions I would just ask is, well, why are you doing it? And then there's, to the extent that the why comes out, how do you justify it based on the cost? I think Mario's exactly right.
All right, last question, but I can only have one part.
Hamid Alai from Australian Institute of Technology. So my question is about this price mechanism in ERCOT and PGM. So as you say, the price cap is increasing in the market and it has impact as we see the value and the frequency of high prices are increasing. Like we see in August that we had like $1,000 per megawatt hour. So, and based on this, in future the frequency of this kind of prices will increase. So it has impact on retailers and they will lose big portion of their profit. So I want to know your opinion about this policy. What do you think? Is it a stable policy and mechanism, and is it going to work because it has a big impact on the profitability of retail companies?
I think that the challenge, the question was, does the energy-only high price caps, is it working, or will over time continue to see higher prices, and that'll cause more and more disruption and problems and unrest with the market design. The issue is that the prices today are too low, and even with the $1,000 we saw, it was clearly not enough to change anybody's behavior about wanting to build new generation. The risk that the market faces is we have sustained low pricing that in no way incentivizes anybody to build new generation. It happens because I think people have some pet projects they want to do, and so they want to go build a power plant. But for the most part, the economics aren't there based on energy pricing to support the development of new generation. And so when those high prices come at more of a frequency, the response from the market will be years in the making, right? And so all the focus right now is on demand response, small scale distributed generation, little small bets all around the place, and we're putting our money at, like on the roulette table, putting our chips kind of all over on making all these little bets instead of making one big bet with like a nuclear power plant or something like that. And so the real test will be when we get those high prices, will we let the high prices persist long enough to incent folks to develop new generation, or will we step in and mitigate that pricing and then tell people what to do?
Okay, well, thank the panelists for their